Awesome, awesome. All right, everyone. Well, good evening, and thank you so much for tuning into our looking ahead and planning ahead session. I hope you all have been taking away a lot from some of our other sessions already. And we hope that you'll be able to take, I'm sure you'll be able to take away a lot from this one as well. So just to kind of really quickly introduce myself, my name is Mauro Perez, and I am our lead college success advisor here at Fulfillment Fund. So before we get started, I did want to go over a couple of housekeeping items. So just as it was mentioned before, we are going to be giving away a couple of gift cards and scholarships during today's session. So we are encouraging students to use the chat function, use the Q&A function. If something resonates with you, put it out there. If you have questions, we'll, of course, try to get to as many of them as we can. And then, of course, we'll also be, our staff will be looking at both the chat and Q&A functions to identify our winners. And then winners will be notified after the event is over. And so one last thing, a big thank you to Cormark International for being our scholarship partner for this evening. We really appreciate the generous support, and their support really allows us, provides us the opportunity to put on events like this. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to our special guest, Dr. Julio Orozco, and Dr. Orozco will share a little bit about himself and then lead our session.
Thank you, Mauro. It's such a delight to be with you all this evening. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to present a little bit of what I've experienced and what I know, and I hope that it'll just be beneficial. What I'm going to do is just share my screen because I had some notes here just by way of a presentation. So hopefully you guys can see that comfortably. But just a little brief introduction about myself. My name's Julio Orozco. I was born in Washington, D.C., just 10 days after my parents came into the United States. I grew up in a Spanish-speaking home because with only 10 days under their belt, my parents only spoke Spanish. And the first time I ever heard English was once I got to kindergarten. And I grew up in an area of Washington, D.C. that you didn't even need to speak English. It was just straight up barrio, and I loved it. And there was so much arts and culture. And growing up, I was surrounded by the arts in that neighborhood. And when it came time to go to college, by that point, I already played a couple different instruments, and I was able to earn a scholarship to go study classical music in New York, which was a very different experience. Made my way to New York and did classical music stuff there, playing, recording, performing. But that opened the door for me to become a teacher, and I became a music teacher. And I quickly realized that some of the most energizing parts of my day was before and after the class, when I got to talk to the students and, hey, what's going on? How are you? How are things? What's going on at home? Et cetera, et cetera. And I just found that to be very life-giving. And at that moment, I thought, maybe I should go back to school and become a counselor, which would enable me to have these conversations a little bit more readily. And so that's what I did. Went back to school, got a master's in counseling. And through that journey, I was able to do counseling, therapeutic service in-home therapy services, at-risk youth, maximum security prison, outpatient substance abuse places, and even higher education. So it's just a broad gamut of communities there. And then later on in life, those two things kind of came together. I was a teacher, then I was a therapist, and I thought, you know what, I'd love to teach other folks how to be effective therapists. So went back to school a third time and earned my doctorate in counselor education and supervision. Had a wonderful time at Georgetown University as I finished that degree and worked for them for a couple of years. Then eventually became a clinical director of a mental health counseling program in New York for 4 years. And I just made my way back to Georgetown July 24th. So I'm in this current role now in Georgetown's Career Center, and I'm the Associate Director for Career Education and Counseling. So that's a little bit about me, but just an outline of what I'd like to do today is, after just this brief intro, to let you know, in addition to internships, what are some things that students can be doing actively to strengthen their resume, because there's tons of ways to build in skills and experiences into the resume. And then the other thing is, what resources are available? What can you tap into in your career centers or career spaces at whatever institution you're at? So, having said that, I already gave a personal background, academic journey, but one more story before I get into the meat and potatoes for tonight. Often when I tell my story, and this is related to career, we assume that career is a linear process, but actually it has twists and turns and valleys and peaks, and there's something about it that it's an unfolding. That's what I want you to get. It's an unfolding, because you might say, how does this guy go from like a classical musician in New York to a career counselor? And but when I share the story, it makes sense. But I want to share one more story to show you just how even happenstance plays a part in all this. The way I became a classical trumpet player was, I actually didn't like the trumpet. I still don't like the trumpet, but it became the vehicle that I got a scholarship to go study undergrad. But what happened is, I wanted to be a drummer. I wanted to play the drums. That's all I wanted to do. I got to seventh grade, beginning band, but the teacher was a retired U.S. Navy trumpet player. And he's asking all the kids, what instrument do you want to play? And these kids are saying instruments that I've never heard of, right? I just didn't have that level of social capital. So when they said oboe and clarinet, I was like, what's happening? And then the kid right next to me says drums, and the teacher freaks out. He's like, absolutely not. And that made me nervous. So the first thing that came into my mind was trumpet. So I said trumpet, and that was it. Like I had to start playing this trumpet. My plan was, I'm going to just do it for the semester and quit. So that's what I did. Stuck it out for a semester. When it was time to return that trumpet that I had rented, we get home, and my grandma's at home, my aunts, a couple of uncles are at home, my parents, they had all chipped in to buy me a professional model Bach Stradivarius trumpet. And so at that moment, it was like, oh, you shouldn't have. Like, I know my plan was to quit, but I say that to say this: the family came together, they all chipped in to help me to lean into this, and I stuck with it, and it became a vehicle for education. And as you know, the rest of my story. So I share that to say that even the random pieces, they fit somehow, and they play a part in this. So let's jump into the meat and potatoes here. In addition to internships, what can you do to strengthen your resume? One of the things that I hear from students is there tends to be this pre-professional thrust. There's something about the resume process and thinking about future career that it informs students to feel like, I have to have these formal internships or else it's not valid. But I want to tell you today that volunteering, service projects, even summer jobs, all of these are okay experiences and welcomed experiences that can round out your resume. And a couple of the reasons why is, number one, recruiters and folks that are seeking out talent, they know developmentally how it works. Like if you're a freshman, sometimes you have opportunities that are specific to upperclassmen. And so they know that. Or if you're in your first or your second year, they realize that on your resume, you're still going to probably have some high school things, and that's okay. I want you to know that you don't have to get into this anxiety of, my resume has to be so pre-professional. Volunteer, service projects, summer jobs, it's really about the transferable skills. So I tell a little bit of a funny analogy or a metaphor type of thing. But let's say that I worked at a popsicle stand last summer, but next year I want to go into consulting. Those two things seem so far apart, but it all depends on highlighting my transferable skills. Because if I'm able to, on my resume, convey that the summer opportunity allowed me to interact with 200 clients a day, and that sharpened my team working skills and communication, that is going to be a lot louder than I worked at a popsicle stand. So it's about the transferable skills and attributes. And I'll have a small graphic from the National Association of Colleges and Employers about the attributes that actually the employers are looking for. So as far as volunteering, keep in mind there are formal and informal ways to volunteer, but in essence, what it is a commitment to give of your time and your knowledge towards a cause, right? And that can be something that is a natural community. There are schools, there could be faith communities, local small businesses, opportunities for you to take what you've been learning throughout your semester and implement it in a way that benefits the community. All of this is acceptable and welcomed on your resume, and it strengthens, it gives the sense of being connected to the community and being someone that gives back. When it comes to service projects, these can be formal activities, such as volunteering with a registered charity or nonprofit, or it can even be something informal like helping an elderly neighbor with everyday tasks. You can, just as some examples, teaching a class at a community center, volunteering at a hospital, just greeting patients and visitors. You can teach folks how to register to vote. And if you have language skills, you can do translating in the community agencies or organizations where you can be of impact. These are ways to think outside of the box, that traditional box of, I have to get this formal internship. What I want to tell students is what you want to get are experiences that increase your transferable skills. That's the most important piece. There are times where students can land very prestigious internships, and that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes I've met students that have very prestigious companies or organizations, but the actual work that they do isn't as substantive. And on the other hand, I've had students that might get involved in a more niche kind of project, but because it isn't so large, they're really able to take on a lot and have really good impact, and their contribution is very substantive. And so, again, keep in mind that it's about the transferable skills. So when you're thinking service projects, I just wanted to briefly mention this. Take some time to identify a passion of yours that you would like to give towards, whether that's your time or your talent, or even learning about a community need. And hopefully that sparks a creative problem solving for you to take action. And so one of the types of service is direct service. What this means is an action that happens in the presence of the persons, animals, or places that we want to impact. This may include volunteering or cleaning up a park, but you're doing it right there within the presence of those that you seek to impact. Indirect service, it might not be in the presence of the person or thing you're seeking to impact, but service might take the form of fundraising or collecting towards a cause. You might not necessarily be in the hospital with the folks, but you can be raising funds for a hospital program. That would be indirect service. Another idea is advocacy. That's when you speak up or against an issue or a solution. Using your voice is actually such. Let me just go in on this one. Bring all of who you are into the space and bring your voice, bring your experience. Being an advocate has impact, and a lot of times advocacy is the way that things get moved forward. And so advocacy would be another type of service. And lastly, but not least, research. And that's finding out new information that informs or demands action. So as an example, you can collect data, survey a group towards a cause that you might be passionate about. But all these things, the goal is it building into me skills I don't have, or sharpening skills that I already have, and making sure that those are transferable. Summer jobs. I get this one all the time. Students sometimes are embarrassed to say, oh, all I did was be a camp counselor, and I don't know if I could put that on my resume. Or you know what, I tutored some kids in my neighborhood, and I just don't know if that's appropriate on my resume. Again, It's about how you tell the story and the experience. When you look at some of these, a camp counselor is responsible for students, for planning activities, for I think camp counselors even have to have CPR licensing. You have to pick activities that are developmentally appropriate. So there's so much that goes into it. Lifeguard, all the responsibilities, but you're thinking, how are these skills transferable? Babysitting, tutoring, these are all things that we shouldn't look over them or assume that they're not professional enough. Because again, and I'm going to keep saying it throughout, employers are looking for transferable skills. So let's talk about that. What does that mean? Companies want to hire folks that are going to add value to their teams and mission. Most employers are not so concerned about where you got those skills as they are the fact that you have them, have used them, and have sharpened them, right? Like I mentioned before, and just like the funny example, it could be at a company as large as Deloitte, or it can be at a popsicle stand. For your next employer or your next opportunity, what they want to know is, do you have communication skills? Do you have team working skills? And it's not so much about where did you get it, but that you got it. So the other thing that I'll throw in here is in 2008, you guys probably know there was this big economic crash and recession, et cetera. And what this ended up happening was it flooded the job market with very high and capable resumes. And this made employers be very choosy and very picky. So it was no longer enough to have the hard skills. Oh, I know R, I know Python, I know SQL, right? Like before, it was okay just to have those skills, and it didn't matter what kind of person you were, just as long as you had the hard skills, you could get a job. But what happened after 2008 is that companies started to say, wait a minute, the hard skills, we can pay professional development to give you the hard skills. Like if you don't know how to use Excel, we can pay for a training for that. But what we can do is teach you how to be a good team member, how to be an effective like communicator, how to not be selfish. And so here's the thing. Companies are not just looking for the skills, but they're looking, is this person going to add to my company's culture? Right? So the interview, I need to share this. Your resume opens the door to an interview. Once you get to the interview, that means the employer has decided this person has enough of the hard skills that we're looking for to probably work here. But in the interview, what we want to see is, will they be toxic to our company culture, or will they add value to the company culture? Right. And so once you're in the interview section, what they're trying to see is, okay, these transferable skills, but how does this person's disposition add to our company's culture or not? So these are the things. Professional development on hard skills, they don't mind spending on that, but they cannot take someone that's toxic and turn them into a valuable team member. And that's what they kind of want to screen. So you need to look out for that. So NACE, National Association of Colleges and Employers, every year they put out a list of attributes that employers are looking for on a resume. And they've switched to the word attributes because in the past they've called them hard skills and soft skills. And that kind of sounds like minimizing the soft skills, when in fact, those are the ones that 8 out of 10 are in the top 10, right? So I give you this figure. This is from 2022. The font is really small, but problem solving skills, ability to work on a team, strong work ethic, analytical skills, communication skills, and technical skills comes in 6th. Of the top 6, 5 of them is what people consider soft skills. So this is why it's so important that you gain these transferable skills and attributes, and then in the interview demonstrate that you're the type of employee that will add to the company culture. So this next part, I'd like to address, so what resources as students can we tap into towards some of the career goals that we have? Very first thing that I'll put a plug in here is for the Career Center. At whatever institution you're at, there's surely going to be a space where career conversations can happen. Leaning into networking, informational interviewing, and knowing the recruiting timelines is important. And then the last piece is going to be career exploration. So we're going to take a look at those at this time. So career centers, what do they have? What do they have to offer? What do they hold? So one of the things that most career centers will have are career counselors. These tend to be folks that have experience and education in counseling. They're therapists, but their focus happens to be around career decision making. Folks say, why would you need a whole counselor therapist for career? Well, when you think about it, you spend at least 40 hours a week, if not more, at your place of work. And usually it's going to be during the best waking hours of the day. Some folks spend more time with coworkers than perhaps at family. Some folks even have to work on the weekend. So career is a big part of our lives and of feeling fulfilled and feeling like we're contributing. So it is a big piece there. And so there's a mental health aspect that can be related. But in addition to that, career counselors can help folks explore. When someone is not quite sure what to do, what career to pursue, there are some tools, there are some assessments and conversations that a career counselor would be prepared to have to bring clarity to that. And I mentioned VIPs in there, and I just want to tell you what that is briefly. In the literature, there are tons of factors that go into the career decision-making process, but the four big ones are our values, our interests, our personality, and our skills. And those can seem like they're siloed, but actually they're very intertwined. And so getting clarity on those four tends to help folks to find a path forward. The next thing you'll have at career centers are industry advisors. So these folks might not have a background in counseling, but they do have experience in specific work industries like business, consulting, health, science, tech, what have you. And they would have like insider knowledge on the companies, the opportunities, the internships coming up. And so connecting with those folks is usually for those that already know, like, I know I want to work in government, or I know I want to work in whatever. You want to connect with that industry advisor. The other thing that career centers provide, workshops and events, workshops that teach you how to network, workshops where you can have, you can actually meet people from different companies, recruiters, and ask questions. And so there are meet and greet events. The other thing that career centers do is they do reviews of resumes and cover letters. They can help you craft that and sharpen it, make it ready to send out. And then job and internship opportunities. A lot of times career centers will have databases for you to search either jobs or internships. So where I work at, they have Handshake, and I know a lot of schools use Handshake. It's a great platform for employers to seek out students. And it's very general. That includes all industries. But there's also databases like Idealist, which is geared more towards nonprofit, NGO, community-based organizations. You have Interstride. So for folks that want to work maybe in another country or have an internship abroad, Interstride is a database for those opportunities. Liquid Compass is things related to the medical field and the nursing field. And of course, there's Glassdoor and Vault that can give you plenty of information and prepare you for interviews, and it gives you back context for different companies, etc. And last but not least, if you were to get an interview, you can come to the Career Center and someone can have a mock interview and give you some tips and pointers on how to effectively tell your story. As far as networking, there's alum that you can connect with, folks that have kind of been there and done that, and you can reach out to them, professors, deans, and employers that come to campus. I just want to stress this. Sometimes we overlook professors and deans, but those are folks that either are currently still in the field or have been in the field. And so they would still have networks and connections and people that they might be able to link you with depending on your interest. So for me, and here's a little another little story about me. I was pretty intimidated going to the career center and using these services when I was in undergrad. I knew where it was and I had an idea of what they did, but I just felt like I didn't have the social capital. I just felt like I'm going to go in there and I'm not going to know what to say or what to do or how to. So I really, my dean became someone that I would come to and say, I'm thinking of doing this. Who can I talk to? And so I just say that plug to lean into professors and deans. But again, even alum, you can go on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn has some pretty great features on how to find alum of your institution that are working or have worked in spaces that might be interesting to you, and sending them in just a message saying, I'd love to talk to you for 10 minutes. If you have the time, would love to hear how you got to where you are, and what were some of the steps that are necessary. So networking is important, and I know that some folks feel like it's intimidating, but hopefully I can give you some tips, which the next one is informational interviewing. I like to think of networking as informational interviewing. That really helps me because I tend to be more introverted. So just making a cold email to a stranger can feel a little awkward. But an informational interview basically is when you are interviewing the professional. And so you get to ask them, what was your major? What were some of the internships you did? Who mentored you? What does my resume need to look like for this industry? What is the recruiting timeline for this industry? So you get to interview them, and you identify someone with a career that you're interested in. Sometimes schools have a database like LinkedIn. So I'll just share this. At the school where I'm at, we have a database that's called Hoya Gateway, and it's just like LinkedIn, people's pictures with a tile. But the cool thing about that is that everyone in that database has volunteered to be in there, and they let you know, I'm happy to help with a resume review, I'm happy to help with an informational interview, I'm happy to connect you to some of my colleagues. So it takes away that cold call feel because these folks have volunteered for this. um, and so, yeah, if you have questions for them, they would be able to provide some information and insight from an insider standpoint that could help you in your career decision making process. I put this up here just to share what the recruiting timeline looks at where I work. This is important because planning ahead is key when you're doing career pieces. For example, if you knew you wanted to do an internship with the federal government, depending on the agency, you would need to do a security clearance. And that security clearance takes a year. So if you were thinking, just as an example, if you wanted to do an internship at the White House or at the CIA or something like that, you have to know, okay, that's going to require the security clearance. That takes a calendar year. So if I'm thinking of interning my junior summer, that means that my sophomore year, I got to put the paperwork, right? So this graphic is just to show timelines. Nothing breaks my heart like when a student comes to my office and says, oh, I really want to go into finance or consulting. I'm ready. And I have to be like, man, it's November. That already happened in August, right? So it's important to know what the timelines are so that that can be your gauge as far as when to have things ready. It'll inform when you need to get to the career center and work on cover letters and resumes and interviewing. Then just kind of getting here closer to the end, career exploration. So what happens if someone's like, okay, this is great information. I didn't know the Career Center had all these resources and how I could leverage them. That's awesome, but I just don't know what I want to do. Well, I mentioned this earlier, career exploration. One of the things that is important in career exploration is called differentiation. So being aware of what I like and what I don't like, being aware of what I'm skilled at and what skills I don't have. And so that's a process of self-exploration. I mentioned the values, interests, personality, and skills. So career exploration services can include activities and even formal assessments like the Myers-Briggs, the strong interest inventory, just to bring clarity. Um, but again, it doesn't have to be as serious as a Myers-Briggs personality inventory. Like, it can be simple conversations. And I bring these questions from Father Himes at Boston University. One of the conversations he would have with students that were kind of undifferentiated, he would say, hey, what brings you joy? And what are you good at? And who does the world need you to be? Like, if you thought of a Venn diagram with those three circles, the sweet spot is something that brings you joy and something that you're good at and that contributes to the community around you. So career exploration, again, I know a lot of the information I gave was probably sounded like, oh, if I already knew what industry, I would use these resources. But even for those of us that are still in the exploration process, the Career Center has something for you, which is the career exploration aspect of things. And I'd like to just now open it up for Q&A with the remaining time that we have. Would love to just hear any questions or comments. I know that you guys have been active on the Q&A, so I'll defer to Mauro as far as what questions I can take at this time, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
So much, Dr. Orozco. You gave a lot of really great examples, a lot of really great information as well. So we do have quite a few questions. I'm kind of noticing a bit of a theme here in regards to resumes, right? I think a lot of students are really wondering about, like, when is a good time to remove some experiences? When is a good time to start adding some experiences? And I think even like along those lines, like tailoring your resume to the job that you're looking for.
Great question. I'm gonna take it in two parts.
Mhm.
What goes on the resume and what comes off of the resume is going to depend on its relevance to the position you're applying for. I'll give you this example. Sometimes maybe somebody was the captain of the tennis team in high school, but then they got to college and they're not the captain. They're just on the team. If you're applying to a position where in the job description it highlights leadership skills, I would put the high school thing before the college thing, because employers are not looking at it hierarchically. Like, oh, high school, that's so childish. I only want to see college things. No, they're looking at what's more relevant. And so if I'm able to leverage the high school experience as the captain of the team, I could say stuff like I was able to liaise between the coaching staff and the players as the team captain. I served as an advocacy role. You can leverage so many more skills. And so please don't think, oh, if it's high school, I got to get rid of it by sophomore year. No, if it's relevant, it can stay on. And so the other part, when you mentioned about customizing the resume, long gone are the days where you could have one resume and blast it out to 20, 30 different places. And I'll tell you why. Now companies are starting to use AI, algorithms, software to screen your documents, your resume, your cover letter before a human actually sees it. So you need to take the time to customize it and use some of the words they're using in the job posting in your resume, because they sometimes will set the algorithm to say they need to hit 8 out of 10 of these skills before we even send it to a human to read it. So customization for the position is key.
Yeah, thank you for addressing the AI question, because I know that right now is a really big topic, and it's definitely getting around how, like you mentioned, some companies are using this technology to sort of filter through resumes and kind of pick out the ones that are maybe a little bit more aligned with what they're looking for, right? This next question has to do with experiences, right? So some students are asking about, can I take up, like, say, a volunteer experience, or would it be beneficial for me to take up a volunteer experience that's aligned with, my major, my career interests, or is there value in taking up, an opportunity that maybe doesn't align with what I'm doing, and how can I fit that in?
Yeah. Yeah. The key word there is going to be the transferable skills. You can take an opportunity that might not be traditionally within the umbrella of your major or industry, but it works because if you're using communication skills, written and verbal, if you're using teamwork skills, if you're using, analytical skills, that, I can't think of any industry that doesn't want those things, right? So don't feel like you have to limit yourself in that way. Now, certainly, if you want to pursue that level of alignment, that's great. But if for some reason you need to be creative and kind of think outside of that box, don't feel like you're at a disadvantage, because really employers want to see those transferable skills.
Absolutely. Thank you. Um, to a couple students asked about overcoming this fear or this uncertainty of transitioning into another career, right? And so I think you kind of touched a little bit about on this about doing that career exploration, right? But sometimes maybe we jump into a specific field, into a specific career, and then we find ourselves wanting to switch. How do we, how does a student navigate that in a professional setting or even before they make that switch? How do you kind of navigate that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it happens so frequently. I think the statistic is anywhere like around 70% of folks are working in a field or industry that is not directly aligned with their undergraduate
Mhm.
major, right? So another piece here: major does not equal career, right? Your diploma just tells people, hey, I am apt to learn. Like if you train, I can learn, but it doesn't mean I'm stuck in this industry for the next X amount of years. So thinking of lateral movements, a good place to start is researching. Occupational network online is something that the Bureau of Labor and Statistics keeps up. And you can go in there and you can type in any job title, and it'll give you so much information about that job, including what are some lateral movements, what are some other jobs that are related in skill, but maybe have a different shading to it. Now, I got to warn you, it's a government website, so like the graphics and like it's not visually engaging, but the information is current and it's really good. But I would say researching, talking to folks that have made that leap, that have made that kind of transition, that's huge as well. But also just having the confidence that your education and your experiences can open those doors. The last thing that I like that I would want you to think is, now I'm locked into this. The class that graduated in 2022, that was the first class that had a 50-50 chance of living to 100 because of
Mhm.
technology and because of
Mhm.
information and the health consciousness. And so it's not about preparing students for the first job out of college. It's preparing them potentially for the 17th or 20th, or even the way technology is happening, preparing them to reinvent themselves over and over for jobs that don't even exist right now, but will in 10, 15 years, right?
Mhm.
So keeping your story fresh is important to make those lateral movements.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that's definitely there's definitely a lot to it. And like you said, talking to folks who have made those changes and those transitions is definitely important. And it aligns with the informational interview piece as well, right? It's like asking those questions. So I think we have time for one or two more questions. And we definitely get this one a lot. What can I do? And again, like I'm a student, maybe I'm a third year, fourth year, I'm getting close to graduating. I haven't been able to get as much experience. Maybe I haven't been able to get as many internships as I would have liked. My resume isn't exactly looking like what I feel like it should be looking like, right? What can I do to, make myself a competitive applicant? Or yeah, I guess we'll kind of start with that.
Yeah. Yeah, first thing is I would say is thinking about that process as multifaceted. Your resume is was one part, the interviewing is another part, your personality, the ability to engage. And then this goes a long way, and I feel like we don't talk about it enough. And it might be American business culture. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. American business culture, like you kind of have to brag about yourself. You go into this and you got to say how awesome you are. And I don't know about you all, but in my context, like that's not. And so we're competing with folks that for this is normal for them to talk this way, right? And so there's a multifaceted piece. There's the documents, there's the presentation of the interviewing, but above all that is the humility and the teachability. it goes a long way as well. So if you're feeling like your resume is not where you would like it to be, I would say go to the Career Center, have someone look at it, make sure that they're able to help you make it as best as possible with what you have. And formatting is a big important piece of it too. It's not just the content, but how it looks, right? It needs to align with the company culture that you're applying for. So have someone look at it in that way. But then think about, okay, I didn't get these certain internships, but what's some research that you did? What are some papers that you wrote that you're particularly proud of? What were some courses you took that you excelled and you felt like you grew a ton? These things can also be added. So you can round it out in that way. And, doing some mock interviews and getting some interviewing skills, I think can increase that confidence for folks that are third and fourth years and feel like, oh, I might not be where I need to be.
Mhm. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. So one last question, and this might be a kind of tough one. I see it a lot, and I'm seeing it in the chat. You talked a lot about transferable skills, soft skills, like these skills that you can put on your resume. What's one skill that you feel, as like you're looking at resumes, you might be thinking, yeah, I really would like to see this on all the resumes. And that might be hard, right? Because each resume is so different. But what would you say is like one of those top skills that, students should be putting on there?
Yeah. Would you guys give me the grace to pick two?
Two would be good. I'm sure
Okay.
students would enjoy that.
Okay. I want to say communication, number one. So that includes verbal and written. Um, that's one. And the other one, teamwork. So many things have now gone to become team driven across industries. So someone that is a good team player that leads when it's their turn to lead, but when it's their turn to follow, they can follow as well. That's huge. And then, of course, that communication piece. So I would pick those two. But I want to throw out a resource to you all. Go ahead and Google NACE, National Association of College Employers, and go ahead and look for the past 5 years. What have been the top five, the top 10 attributes that employers are looking for? You'll see that within those transferable soft skills, you'll be able to pull together a little smattering, a little sample size of what they're looking for. But usually in the top, you're going to have teamwork and communication.
Awesome. Yeah, those are really great skills to put on there. So thank you so much, Dr. Orozco. Students, if you can just join me in thanking our guests today for sharing all this really wonderful and great information. Definitely very helpful. We hope you all, took away a lot from today. Again, thank you so much for joining us. And again, Dr. Orozco, thank you so much for your time.